Okay, we pick up our story with Ibtisam, who is a 16-year-old young woman who gets a part-time job as a waitress at Dar Naji, the famous Moroccan restaurant. Now, she's 16 years old, Ibtisam, and her initial motivation is, like a lot of 16-year-olds, she wants a little extra money to be able to buy clothes, spend money on going out on the weekend. And like a lot of 16-year-olds, she doesn't want to do a lot of effort more than what's required. So she wants to, show up, work her shift, but basically not be bothered. But this is her first job, and over the course of the first few months, she begins to participate in team meetings, and she starts seeing how her job is affecting other people and how other people depend on her. And she starts listening to stories about stressful moments from the past or big successes from the past that show the values of the group. And she learns to accept feedback, which is not easy for a 16-year-old, but she starts learning that she can do better at her job, and she shouldn't, be defensive. She should look at it as an opportunity to do better. So, in other words, over a few months, Ibtisam, this first job gets her thinking in a new way. Instead of taking satisfaction just in making money, getting in and out, she begins to feel good that she's part of this team and that she's earning her colleagues' respect. So in this first chapter of the story, we see Ibtisam learning how to play a role within this larger system of this team at Dar Naji. Now, let's imagine Ibtisam goes away for a few years and comes back age 24. And she's hired back at Dar Naji, this time as an assistant manager. But she's done a business course. She's very interested in business, entrepreneurship, finance. And after studying, she's now able to look at all the different parts of the restaurant and see how the finance and accounting works and how the supply chain works for getting the food. And she's able to see at this higher level how this system of the restaurant works and why these different processes and rules exist. And as assistant manager, she's able to identify inefficiencies, things that the restaurant could do better, and take steps to fix them. Even if there's some resistance, she is able to create a plan and make new changes to the system. And now she's not only happy being part of a team and being respected, she's taking her own ideas and putting them into action. She's helping the restaurant perform better. And so that's a real new source of satisfaction for her now in this role as an assistant manager. So we could say at this stage in the story, Ibtisam is learning how to see the whole system and help it succeed. Not just play a role within the system, but to see how the whole system works and to make changes that help it work better. So now in the third chapter of the story, Ibtisam is now 42, and she comes back to Morocco after 10 years in Mexico and Costa Rica in the ecotourism sector. And this time she gets the top job. She's general manager of Dar Naji restaurant. And she looks around and says, what if? She begins creating new offers, teaching tourists about Moroccan culture by learning to cook. She takes her team on visits to learn about new business models from Central America or from Western Europe. And she takes satisfaction from inspiring new directions and possibilities, not only for her own team, but for the Moroccan culinary sector as a whole. So we see she's not only seeing the system of the restaurant. Now at 42, she's at this higher level again of seeing the system of the restaurant as a system, meaning it's just one possible model among many others. So keep these three chapters of the story in mind. How do we grow? What can we do to move through these different levels of psychological maturity? The work of Robert Kegan and Lisa Lahey build on the pioneering work of a psychologist named Carol Dweck. And remember, until the 1980s, the science of psychological development was very focused on children and adolescents. So when Dweck was a graduate student in the early 1970s, she studied, like many psychologists, children. And so she began studying. She was very interested in how they coped with failure, with setbacks. And she quickly realized that cope which in English means to kind of manage or deal with something, was the wrong word. Carol Dweck says some children didn't just cope with failure, they relished it, they enjoyed it, she says. For some people, failure is the end of the world, but for others, it's this exciting new opportunity. And so Carol Dweck coined this new term, growth mindset. So in her research, Carol Dweck has found that individuals who believe their talents can be developed through hard work, good strategies, input from others, these people tend to achieve more than those who believe that whatever talent they have is just an innate gift, which she calls a fixed mindset. People with a growth mindset tend to worry less about looking smart and put more energy into learning. And in her, in her studies of companies that different practices and mindsets in corporate culture, she's found that when companies embrace a growth mindset, meaning where more employees and more managers demonstrate the behaviors and attitudes that she associates with growth mindset, that employees in those companies report feeling 34% on average more empowered and engaged. They trust their colleagues more and they're more likely to innovate. Whereas the other companies that are more dominated by fixed mindset behaviors and attitudes report more cheating and deception among employees, presumably to gain an advantage one against the other in the talent race. Growth mindset organizations, Dweck has found, are likely to hire from within their ranks, while fixed mindset organizations reflexively look for outsiders. So organizations that think, oh, we have a problem, we need to get someone from outside to help it, versus growth mindset where we have the talent we need, we just have to develop it from within. And whereas fixed mindset organizations typically emphasize, if people are applying for jobs, what are your credentials, what are your past accomplishments, growth mindset firms value potential, forward-looking potential, capacities to develop new skills, and are you passionate about learning? A pure growth mindset doesn't exist, says Carol Dweck. We all have a mixture of both. And we all have our own fixed mindset triggers. When we face challenges, receive criticism, or fare poorly compared with others, we can become insecure or defensive, which inhibits growth. To remain in a growth zone, we must identify and work with these triggers. In other words, identify the things that are blocking us from this growth mindset and do our best to remove them. Kagan and Leahy talk about this growth process as not something that's happy all the time and comfortable. Just as labor pains, meaning the pains of childbirth, are a part of bringing new life into the world, the process of human development, of seeing and overcoming one's previous limitations, can involve pain. Unlike happiness, considered happiness as a state brought on by experiencing only the so-called positive emotions, happiness of just feeling really good all day, all the time, happiness as a process of development includes the experiences of loss, pain, and suffering. Moving to these higher levels of our capacities can involve some pain. And this, in fact, is very tied back to Aristotle. And so Kagan and Leahy say the roots of their theory of growth and development go back to Aristotle's concept of eudaimonia, which they call the satisfactions of experiencing one's own growth and unfolding, becoming more of the person one was meant to be, bringing more of oneself into the world. They talk about 3 levels of mental complexity, which we can see reflected in Ibtisam's story at Darnaji. So the first level that Ibtisam achieves at 16, this is when she's having her first job, is she learns, instead of just thinking about her own needs, she learns to think about the team. She learns how to care and take feedback from others, care about them, help them, follow common rules. And her sense of self is now not just about, do I get what I need, but am I accepted by the team? And do people like me? Do they tell me I'm doing a good job? So in this case, her sense of self is part of this group identity and relies on what they think about her. In the second chapter of the story, Ibtisam comes back from business school and now is assistant manager. And this represents what Kagan and Leahy call the self-authoring mind, where you're capable of creating a plan, an agenda, solving problems at this higher level, this systemic level. And now your sense of self is not just about whether people like you or not, but whether you are following your own code, this set of values that you have chosen as the values that are most important to you. Are you living up to them or not? And so the self-authoring mind is seeing the whole system and is more independent of just what other people think about you. And then this final phase where she comes back from Mexico and Costa Rica to Morocco, Kagan and Leahy would call this phase of Ibtisam's life the self-transforming mind, where she's not only creating a plan of how to make the restaurant work better in the way it's currently designed, she's able to see all these different possibilities, possible ways of organizing the system. So a self-transforming mind holds multiple, maybe even contradictory frameworks of meaning without being bothered by that. It's a self that is not just about following a code anymore, but about learning, about dialectical learning, which means learning through the conflict of opposites, by challenging your current beliefs with new experiences, and seeing how any one code of belief, in fact, is incomplete. That these different frames of meaning and kinds of systems are interdependent. And so this is the third phase, what Kagan and Leahy call the self-transforming mind. We could summarize it by looking at it this way. When Ibtisam is moving into the socialized mind, she's developing answers to the question, how can I play my role better? Self-authoring mind at age 24, she's answering the question, she's developing answers to the question, well, how can this system, this restaurant, achieve its goals better? And what is my agenda that I can execute in order to help the restaurant? And finally, when she comes back at 42, she's answering a different kind of question, which is what other ways of thinking are possible? What other kinds of services could a restaurant offer? How could we redesign our restaurant to do something it's never done before? So this is what Kagan and Leahy would call the self-transforming mind. And in their empirical studies of adults, they find that about 92% on average, the participants in their study, had developed to that first level of socialized mind. You see it here as stage 3 because it follows 2 stages of childhood and early adolescence. Early childhood being about impulse, and then later childhood and early adolescence being about instrumental mind, being able to get things for yourself. So stage 3, what they call is socialized mind, 92% of adults had reached that level. Around 40%, so less than half, had graduated from socialized mind into self-authoring mind, where Ibtisam was at 24. And a very small number, only 7%, had made progress toward this final stage of what they call self-transforming mind, and fewer than 1 in 100 actually fully achieved that level of psychological complexity. So it's very rare. Self-authoring mind, less than half; self-transforming, around 8%, and less than 1% actually achieving that final stage. So why is this important to us now? Kagan and Leahy say, well, let's consider what was once asked of people in their workplace. Formerly, it was usually enough if people were good team players, pulled their weight, were loyal to the organization, and could be counted on to follow conscientiously the directions and signals of their boss. In other words, the socialized mind, Ibtisam at 16, that was perfectly adequate to handle the nature of yesterday's demands on employees. But things have changed. We've witnessed the transition from work that's dominated by physical labor, repetitive tasks, to mind work, mental work, creative work, proactive problem solving as the dominant employee activity. These developments create demand for higher levels of education and training. But what is not understood is that they also create new demands on our psychological resources. So it's not just about what you know, training on new software or new accounting skills. It's about how you think, rearranging how you think about the world. Specifically, these developments, the developments that the current workplace needs from workers, ask for a greater capacity for innovation, for self-management, personal responsibility, and self-direction at every level of the business. In other words, now we more and more need workers at the level of the self-authoring mind. And in this VUCA world, what does that mean for managers and leaders? So if workers need to move from socialized mind to self-authoring mind, what do CEOs and top managers need to do? Well, Kagan and Leahy say there may have been a day when it was enough for leaders to just develop worthy goals, a good agenda, a good strategy, good norms, get everyone aligned around it, and work to just keep performance high. Skillful as such managers may be, however, these abilities no longer suffice. Needed now are leaders who can not only run, but also reconstitute, reinvent, reshape their organizations, their norms, missions, and cultures in an increasingly fast-changing environment. In other words, a leader as learner, making meaning with a self-transforming mind. And the question is, what's stopping us, for all of us, from achieving that higher level of complexity? Why can't all of us get to that self-transforming mind? Well, Keegan and Leahy say that one of the things that's holding us back from growing is a psychological tendency they call the immunity to change. The mind, like the body, they say, has an immune system, an intelligent force of nature that works continuously beyond our awareness to protect us and keep us alive. And like our body's immune system, our psychological one can occasionally misread reality and see danger that's not really there. Then our immune system itself becomes a source of trouble. As it protects us, quote unquote, it's actually rejecting changes the system needs in order to thrive, such as when you get a new organ, if your organ fails and you get a new one, and your body thinks that your new organ is a threat and it starts attacking it and rejecting it. So similarly, new ideas that we need, new ways of thinking, can be unconsciously attacked by our minds. So Kagan and Leahy say that we each can have hidden commitments, unconscious commitments, loyalties, or fears that can keep us from achieving goals we sincerely believe in. Overcoming this immunity to change requires first identifying what these commitments are. What are these commitments are that we don't we aren't actively aware of every day? What are we assuming about the world that makes those commitments so strong? And then we need to teach ourselves how to test and hopefully change or modify those assumptions. Only by bringing our tacit assumptions to the surface and testing them with fresh data can we overcome our immunities to change, both as individuals and as organizations and communities. So a question for all of us is, are we ready to overcome our immunity to change?